Start recording. Okay, so welcome to week 3. Hopefully, we've got all the technical snafus out of the way. So what I did last night, and I thought would be helpful for students, is a summary of the first 2 weeks of class. So it pretty much just goes over what we covered each week. So in week 1, we covered the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as well as the Iraq War. And then remember that all recorded lectures can be found under conferences. On that left-hand tab right here, and then you'll click under concluded conferences, and I put the date of each class so that it's pretty easy to figure out which one you need to watch. Now, there were issues in week 1 because when you guys get those links from Canvas to accept a course, if students didn't accept that during week 1, they're not going to be able to view any videos prior to accepting that. So that's where the technical snafus came in during week 1. So here is the backup, YouTube backup for Monday, May 8th. You can click there to watch that. Now the recorded videos on Canvas only under the conference tool only last for 2 weeks. So keep that in mind. They're going to start deleting themselves kind of naturally on their own. These YouTube videos will live there forever, but I'm hoping for the rest of the semester we don't have to do that and that I can just do everything through Canvas. Then the recorded lecture from Wednesday, May 10th did not pick up audio. So again, our instructional design team had a YouTube backup, which you can access right there. And then for week 2, because I was out of town and I recorded the lecture before I went out of town, no one was able to access it because I don't have the proper plugin on my personal laptop. So again, here is your YouTube backup. But note on this one, when you click on it, it's going to show it's 5 hours long. It is not 5 hours long. It's just when the instructional design team, they just play it and they record it on YouTube, and he forgot, and it just kept like recording. So it's really only like the first hour, 20 minutes or so. It'll be after the video's over, but I put that note there. So if you look at it and you're like, oh my God, 5 hours. She's a slave driver. That's not 5 hours, okay? Then during class on Wednesday, May 17th, we discussed the Syrian civil war and the historical background of Al-Qaeda. And as of that date, I have not received any notifications from students, and they were not able to access that. So I think we're kind of in the clear now. If students haven't accepted the course certificate at this point, that's on them. You know, like it's week 3, like you got to know what your classes are and what you're doing. So we should be good to go. And then note, Canvas only keeps them for 2 weeks. And then remember that you need to be noting the participation nuggets. And then the confusion about the final project milestone assignment. So I had set the due date for Sunday, May 21st, but I had put the assignment under week 5 on accident. As this was my mistake, I have extended the deadline to Friday, May 26th with no late penalty. So some of you did get it in last night, and that's great. But if you want till Friday to submit it, that's okay too, and there will be no late penalty. And if you even need till Sunday, I would consider extending it to Sunday as well with no late penalty, considering that was my error. And the reason I wanted it due in week 2 and not week 5 is because this is something I want to approve your topics before you move forward with the final project, and I just don't want anything left to the last minute on this project. So that's why I wanted it done in week 2, and then you have 5 weeks to work on it. David?
Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, let's look at it, and we will. I'll open up the assignment next and we'll go over step by step. And then moving into week 3, today we're going to finish up the module on the Middle East. We're going to be talking about ISIS and the European migration crisis that comes out of the Syrian civil war and the rise of ISIS. And then on Wednesday, we're going to move out of the Middle East and we're going to start talking about Russia and current relations between Russia and the West. Okay, so let's look at what we've got coming up. So we'll look at that assignment first. Yes. You know, that's a really good question. We will not have class. The campus will be closed on Monday. So as of now, I'm assuming there's not going to be a class, but I'm going to check with the administration just to make sure with a blended if they want me to still record something for you guys.
Usually
They didn't do it in blended?
Nathan took his classes, it was no classes.
Let's just say 90% right now, no class on Monday, and I probably won't do a lecture unless well, there definitely won't be class. But if I do record a lecture, I'll let everyone know and they can access that.
It's closed all day?
I believe so. I mean, the Commons will still be open, but like administration won't be here. It's like a official national holiday for Memorial Day. Oh, well, the cafe will be, are you guys serving all day? Yeah, okay, so there you have it. But yeah, as far as I know, there won't be any classes. I'll double check that today and post an announcement about that and just let you guys know. So you're welcome. Okay, so the final project milestone assignment. So don't overthink this assignment. First thing I want to say, I had a few questions from students this weekend, like, oh my gosh, what do I do? How am I going to do this? And really, as long as you do this assignment, you're going to get the points. So what I want you to do is you'll just open a Word document and indicate which 4 topics that your memes are going to address. So you're going to say, I'm going to address cybersecurity, the Iraq War, global warming, and global hunger. Those are my 4 topics, or whatever it is. And again, if it's something we're not covering in class, you can still do that. This is my opportunity to veto anything that isn't covered in class. If anything that we do cover in class, if you look ahead at modules, is definitely approved. If it's something we're covering in class, but if there's something outside of class, like we're not getting to cybersecurity in this semester, but like what just happened last week with all of that WannaCry hacking issue, like if you want to address that, that's okay. So this is your opportunity to just kind of run ideas past me, and you're also not locked in at this point. So if maybe in week 4 we talk about something that really piques your interest and you want to change one of your topics, just ask me and that's fine too, okay? So all you're going to do is you're going to have each of your topics, and then for each topic, I want you to include one approved media source or an assigned reading or viewing from class that relates to each topic. So this is a source that you might use for the write-up in the final project that you're going to do for each meme. But you don't have to do anything with the meme at this point. Just give me a topic and an article relating to the stance that you're going to take on it, and then just give me a brief paragraph, like this article is about the WannaCry hack that just happened last week, and it's from the point of view of the English hospitals that were impacted, or something like that. Okay, so just kind of a brief overview. Don't give me essays, don't give me like a ton of content here. I just want to see that you're starting to do some preliminary research, you're using approved sources, and that you're picking your topics. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so all you really need to do is topic, link to the article that you're citing, and then a little write-up about each article. And then if you have any questions, obviously let me know, or if you want to send me your draft, if you want me to approve it or give you some feedback, I'm happy to do that as well. So that will be due by Friday, or if you need an extension until Sunday, just let me know, okay? Any questions on that? Does that clear up any questions, David?
A memes cartoon.
Yeah.
How do we make that?
Okay, so most students are going to do a meme because you can use images off the internet.
Okay.
So if you have you ever seen like a meme generator? So you can go to these meme generators and you can pick like popular memes. And this one is like, here, the most interesting man in the world meme, right? Like, I don't always invade Iraq, but when I do, I'm looking for weapons of mass destruction, or something like that. So and it's up to you. You don't have to use any of these, but you can, and then it'll let you write your text in here. But you can use any image from the internet. So if you want to do something about cybersecurity and you want to use an image that correlates to this recent WannaCry thing, you can just find the image and then put your own writing over it.
Okay.
And then all you have to do is cite where you got that image. Okay.
So how do you merge pictures? Like if I wanted to put somebody in a snowstorm.
Okay. That would be Photoshop.
Photo.
Do you know how to do Photoshop?
Basic things, it's not too hard to learn on tutorials.
Yeah,
online.
I guess I can fake it.
Yeah, and it doesn't, like, the quality of any Photoshopping you guys do, you're not being judged on that,
Okay.
right? It's really, I'm really grading you more on the stance that you're taking and how you back that up, right? So if you take a stance that I don't agree with, you're not going to fail. I just want to see your stance, and then I want to see your write-up and how you connect that as a global issue today. But if you want to use one of these popular memes, you can. So for Frank, who is meme challenged, let me show you. So this most interesting man in the world meme. And if you do like an image search, you can see like people make memes all the time. Oh, this one's funny. And they photoshopped Wilford Brimley's head on that. But I mean, what I would suggest is you just like Google popular memes and just start getting an idea of kind of what people make online.
Can you make like does it have to be like an actual existing meme?
No.
Or can you use a picture?
It can just be a picture. Like if you're making a point about the Iraq War and you want to use the photo of Saddam Hussein's statue toppling and you want to use that as your background, that's fine. You do not have to stick with a typical meme. You really have a lot of creativity on this, however you want to do it. As long as you have an image that somehow correlates to what you're trying to make a point of, that's all I care about. But if you want to make it a little easier and you do follow these types of memes and you just want to use a meme generator, that's okay too. And you'll just cite the meme generator as where you got your topic. Does that make sense? On Wednesday, what I'll do is I'll pull up some ones from last semester, and I'll show you guys that some students use meme generators and some use other images as well. And that gives you kind of an idea of what I'm looking for here. And pretty much most students, as long as you meet the requirements as far as your write-ups and you answer the questions I ask you to answer about each meme, you're going to do pretty well on this assignment. Again, I'm not judging you on your artistic ability or anything like that, because I have zero artistic ability, so I'm not going to judge you on that. So on Wednesday, we'll go over it a little bit more, but as far as today goes, just focus on getting this project done, finding a source that backs up each topic. And again, you're not locked into those sources either. If you want to change your sources by the final project submission, that's okay too. This is just to kind of get you thinking and get you going. Yes?
It says due 21st.
I know, I'm fixing it. So this will stay open until Friday. All my assignments always stay open for 5 days. So it's left open for you guys. So you'll be good to go. And then if it tells you late submission, like you've submitted late, don't worry about that. Because when I go in the grade, I'll just waive that. It's not gonna hurt your grade. Just this one. Yeah, Ethan.
Because I gotta redo it.
Yeah, that's fine. You can, if you want to redo it and resubmit, that's okay too. Okay, and then what else are we looking at? So let's look at week 3 that we're in now. So again, we're going to kind of put everything together that we've talked about the last 2 weeks in regards to the Middle East, and we're going to examine the impacts of these wars on the rise of ISIS. We'll learn about how ISIS has displaced millions of Syrians and Iraqis, and the stress this has placed on Europe. And then we're going to pivot to Russia, and we'll examine the current relationship between Russia and the West. So we'll also look at a historical perspective too, starting with Russia during the Russian Revolution, the Cold War era, and then how Russia and the U.S. and the other Western countries kind of get along today. And then what you guys have you have 2 chapters, chapters 2 and 6 in your book, and then 2 videos, A Frontline Rise of ISIS. This is a student favorite. Students always like this video. It's about Putin. It's a few years old, but he's still president, at this time, so it's still it's pretty relevant, but it kind of gives you a timeline of how Putin rises to become president of Russia. And students always get really good insight out of this video, so I think you guys will really like it. And then week 3 quiz is due on Sunday, May 28th, and I promise there's nothing else due this week, so you guys are good. All right, and then looking ahead at our modules, in week 4, you'll have a reflection essay due about the things we talked about in regards to the Middle East. Again, pretty simple. I just want to get your feedback. It gives me an idea an opportunity to assess how well you guys have picked up information from class. And as long as you answer the specific questions I ask you to answer in the essay, you're going to do fine on it. And then a quiz again. And then you'll see, other than that, you don't really have anything due other than quizzes until week 7. And then you have another reflection essay, final project, and another quiz. So if you want to get started, that's why I suggest you get started on the final project now so it all doesn't come and hit you at once. Okay? So that's where we're standing in class. Any questions so far? Everyone doing okay? I graded your week 1 quizzes. I graded your media literacy assignments. And actually it was really interesting because I found several of you indicated sources where you got your news from that I'd never heard of. Some like news aggregate outlets like News 360. Someone mentioned that. I don't know if it was in this class or the other. But you guys did really good applying your checklist and then assessing each of those articles based off the checklist and the bias and the reliability of each source. So, in future classes, as I pass out articles or things like that, we'll also be applying that checklist in class and give you more experience with that. Okay, so let's see, today in history. May 22nd, 1843, the first wagon train left Missouri for Oregon. So that could have been maybe some of your ancestors. It takes about 6 months, 4 to 6 months, to take a wagon train from Missouri to Oregon. You guys ever heard of the Donner Party? Yeah, they unfortunately took a detour, which was not a good detour, and they ended up eating each other. It's unfortunate what happens in history sometimes. Okay, let's take out your phones and take a poll. So, who is the current leader of ISIS? Now it's working. Did you vote, Ethan?
Yeah.
What'd you vote for?
Why don't you my journal?
What's that?
I said, why don't you my journal?
Well, I just want to tell you if you're right or wrong.
I voted for the third one.
Abu Bakr Shakal?
Yeah, that was.
You were wrong, but that's okay.
I figured.
It's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. I always remember that by Baghdad, right? And Iraq war, and that kind of connects it for me. Ayman al-Zawahiri is the leader of Al-Qaeda. You guys remember? Abu Bakr Shakal is the leader of Boko Haram, and Asim Umar is the Al-Qaeda leader in India. So there you have it. Okay, we're going to come back to another poll a little bit later, but let's go ahead and get started. Did you guys notice anything trending in the news this weekend that anyone wanted to share? Anything interesting? It's going to be a relatively quiet weekend after a pretty explosive week last week. David, what did you notice?
President don't know how to dress the Middle East.
His-
He's completely lost.
He is a bit lost. We'll see as more analysis comes out this week how he does. It's supposed to be a 9-day trip, so we'll see how.
Because if you look at the audience, they're like,
Yeah.
we have to listen to this guy because they don't trust him. They don't like him because of his foreign policy.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, the Muslim ban obviously is going to offend people in those specific countries where there's Muslim populations. There was a funny GIF I saw of Steve Bannon, and he's surrounded by like Middle Eastern leaders, and it was really funny because it was just like a GIF, and he like completely looked out of place, you know, like really, really uncomfortable. But you know, a little comic relief. What did you notice this weekend?
I don't know if it was this weekend or last weekend, but there was an article that came out where every time there's a press briefing for the president, they have to condense everything to like 4 to 5 minutes, or else he gets sidetracked and loses.
Yeah, so I've read a few articles talking about how he does have a shorter attention span and needs things a little more, well, and you know, his background is not in foreign policy or government, you know, so it's not as if he has any experience leading into this. So things kind of have to be, from what I'm reading, a little dumbed down for him, simpler, bullet points, charts. Again, these are leaks coming out of the White House, so I'm not sure necessarily how accurate they are. They sound pretty accurate, but you never know. What else do you want to say, David?
That 1 point something billion dollars arms deal.
Yes, so there's a $110 billion arm deal with Saudi Arabia. Now, this is a funny thing, the thing I'm finding humorous as a historian looking at Trump's presidency, because as a historian, I have to tell you guys, this is a fascinating time for me. While I did not vote for Trump, it's still fascinating to watch this all unfold, because in 20 years I'm going to be teaching this. So you know what I did is during the election, I saved memes, and I'm going to teach this election through memes in like 20 years. It's going to be great. But what's interesting is, you know, during Obama's presidency, Trump was still on Twitter. He's very active on Twitter. And a lot of the things he's doing now, there's tweets that he criticized Obama for doing the exact same things. So for this arms deal, and another thing, not just the arms deal, but Saudi Arabia gave millions of dollars to Ivanka Trump's like charity foundation. And then during Obama's presidency, when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, Trump was tweeting about how the Clinton Foundation got money from Saudi Arabia and how they should not accept that money because, you know, that country has serious human rights issues. Like, being allies with them is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Hypocritical in a sense of how we treat other countries that violate human rights issues, but we have this really great relationship because we get money from them, and there's arms deals, and there's all that. But it's always interesting because a lot of things that Trump does, you can go back to his Twitter feed like 4 years ago, and he's tweeting something that completely contradicts what he's doing now, which shows when you become president and you become a politician, it's a whole different ballgame. So it's kind of hard to judge leaders because they're making decisions that we're never going to have to actually face. What do you think, Frank?
Oh, well, you're talking about human rights violations. Every Friday, was it?
Yeah, they're right.
Public executions.
Yeah.
See, in Saudi Arabia, if you kill somebody, they chop your head off.
Yeah, and you know,
If you steal something, they cut your hand off.
yeah, they follow a very strict, well, have you guys ever heard of a sect of Islam called Wahhabism? It's like a literal interpretation of the Quran, like extremely literal. And so that's where they come in with kind of the eye for the eye. They cut off hands. Women are veiled. Women can't drive. But what's interesting is when ISIS kind of rose to power in the Middle East, and people in the West are like, oh my gosh, they're beheading people and they're putting it online. I'm like, well, Saudi Arabia beheaded like 150 people last year, but they're our allies. So it's very interesting, this kind of tenuous geopolitical relationships that we have with certain Middle Eastern powers, but that we then have with other Middle Eastern powers. So it'll be interesting to see any fallout that comes out of Trump's visit to the Middle East, any positives or any negatives. So he's there all week. So if you guys see anything interesting you guys want to share with the class, we can definitely address it and look at some articles that are coming out.
It certainly cuts down on the stealing and the murdering out there.
Oh, I'm sure it does, yeah.
I mean,
Well, like what people always say, we should go back to hangings on the courthouse lawn here. I was like, well, I guess you could pay-per-view that. Make a little money off it.
well, I mean, that whole thing about scared straight. I mean, having your hand chopped off.
Yeah.
That's pretty much scared straight.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, maybe we should go back to that, Frank. What do you think?
No.
No, I'm good with that too. Well, the thing is if you're gonna have a moral high ground as a country, you have to live that moral high ground, right? And if you're gonna criticize other countries for doing human rights violations, you also can't have human rights violations on your own. And that's where the do you guys remember the CIA torture report that came out last year? Yeah. And that's where it's like if we decry other countries for torturing, we can't torture either. But that's a whole different story.
We just do it on the go.
We just do it quietly. Okay, so first I want to introduce the ISIS flag to you guys. I'm sure you've all seen this flag at some point, right, in the news or online, maybe as a meme. Do you know what it says? Do you guys want to guess?
We kill you.
Kind of.
If you don't join us, we'll kill you. Praise the Lord.
So it's a phrase that's referred to as the Shahada, and what it is it's just the Islamic creed. So when you actually interpret it, it's there is no God but God, Muhammad is the messenger of God. So it's a very religious message, which I'm sure isn't surprising to any of you. Now when you think about the rise of ISIS and the specific causes, what do you think leads to this group forming and becoming so powerful within a short period of time? What do you think?
I would say what was left over from Russia invasion of that.
Okay, so the invasion of Afghanistan, and that kind of kicks off the modern Islamic jihad movement in this time period. But what about specifically what we've been talking about in the Middle East? What has led, when it comes to unrest in that region, to ISIS? The power vacuum. Okay, so that's your number one key point, right? Is that, we topple Saddam Hussein, there's this fight for power in Iraq, and you have all of these Baathists, right, that are disgruntled, they're not integrated back into the government. They join up with they join up with Al-Qaeda, and then at the same time, you have poor timing for the Syrian civil war in 2011, right? And since they share a border, that all just kind of merged together. So that's kind of your, generally speaking, your big event that leads to the rise of ISIS. But there's other smaller things that then impact that power vacuum in this rise of ISIS. So we talked a little briefly about them when we talked about Al-Qaeda, about how well they use social media. And I was like, maybe I should pull up some of their social media. Then I thought an FBI flag might be opened on me, so I didn't do that. But they're very... There's probably already an FBI file on me anyway. But they're very astute with social media. They know how to use technology and platforms like Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, right, to reach people throughout the world. So they're very good about that. They're very good at attracting young Muslims from the Middle East, and they're really good at tapping into this feeling of anger, helplessness, particularly anger towards Western countries for airstrikes, right, that are killing family members. And that's one of the criticisms that Obama is going to receive from historians as time progresses, is his drone program. because the quickest way to radicalize someone in the Middle East is to kill their family. And even if you're not radicalized, but if there's a drone strike and it kills someone in your family, you're going to blame the United States, regardless of the geopolitics behind it. And so there is a lot of anger in the Middle East over these types of drone strikes and these air raids, and not just from the U.S., from Russia as well.
Yet all these refugees want to come here.
They don't, though. That's interesting, because they're not going to Western countries. So we'll talk about that when we get to the European migration crisis. Okay, they also rule by fear, so they're able to not only recruit, but they're able to keep a lot of those recruits, because if you join ISIS and you want to leave, what happens? Yeah, you're done. Like, you're in. It's a lifetime membership. And if you do manage to sneak away, especially there have been some people from Western countries that go out there and they try to come back, and then it's like, no, that's not how this works, right? Exactly. You can't come back. Now, they're also very organized, right? This is a sophisticated group. They are not this just kind of like, bumbled backwards people. These are very smart, organized people. And they're also very, very wealthy. Do you guys want to guess what their net worth of ISIS is? It's $2 billion. Yeah, and that's more than Al-Qaeda. They're actually richer than Al-Qaeda. So how are they getting money?
All they're selling
Oh, wait, they're selling what?
reporters back to Europe.
They do. They ransom reporters back to France, I believe France and Sweden. Some European countries have paid ransom for reporters, so that's one way. Who else said? Did someone say oil? They've actually seized oil fields in the area, and they're using that oil, and they're selling that oil. Did someone say robbing banks? They're robbing banks. Yeah, they're robbing banks. Did someone say kidnapping? Yeah.
That's actually what I said.
Yeah, they're selling off people, not just reporters. They're also getting donations from very wealthy supporters throughout the wealthy Gulf states.
And our government won't admit this, but the support they give overseas to these countries actually funded them too.
Yeah, it actually, and a lot of the weapons that we gave to allies in Iraq are ending up in the hands of ISIS as well. So they have several different income streams. So they have a lot of money. They're able to use this money to promote their ideals. They also are very good about indoctrinating their local populations, right? They have their own schools. They try to get people when they're young and impressionable and kind of a brainwashing mentality. They're a Sunni-based group that has a very strict interpretation of Sharia law. So even if there's if they're like in an area where it's Sunni dominated, if those Sunnis aren't being as pious as ISIS thinks, they'll kill them. They'll kill Shiites. They'll kill Westerners. So it's really, if they'll kill anyone that does not subscribe to this very, very strict brand of Sharia law.
But Islam is a religion of peace.
Well, if you look at all, this is an interesting thing. So I have a slide for that actually. So all religions have violence in their texts. That's a fact, right? Yeah. The issue is, in 2017, do you take that literally, right? How do you take these religious texts in a modern secular society and apply them to your life? So when you look at, I'm going to use the Bible for an example. When you look at specific parts of the Bible, we're all sinning because, like, I have a tattoo. My fabric I'm wearing is mixed. You guys don't have beards, right? So it's like, how literal do you take some of the things in the Bible, right? Do you stone your neighbor because she wasn't a virgin when she got married? No, right? Like, there's violence in all of these texts, right? The thing that holds it together is that the majority of people are relatively rational. Like, Frank isn't out killing women because they're not virgins, even though he's a Christian, because he recognizes that that's wrong. The majority of people who are Muslims also are not doing this as well. But you get the fanatics, right, that overshadow it, and then the media jumps on it, and that's all you see, right? You don't see the good things that Muslims in the community are doing. Like, when the Flint, Michigan water thing became a problem, like, local Muslim communities raised a lot of money and donated to those communities. Like, they're doing good things too. But what we see in the media is always tied to Islam because of terrorism, right? And you can apply that to the United States too, because when you look at how they report on shooters in the United States, like, you guys remember Dylan Roof? He was the guy that shot up that black church in South Carolina. He's a white Christian, but that's a terrorist act. He went in and he killed 9 black people. But they don't call him a terrorist because he's white. He's a gunman, or he's a mentally unstable gunman, or no, he's a terrorist, right? So again, how the media portrays this has a big impact on how people are going to consume that information and internalize that information. So yeah, are these people that are these terrorists, are they literally interpreting the Quran? Yeah, there's things in the Quran that say bad things, but there's also things in the Quran that say really nice things. Ivan, and then David, and then Frank.
So what qualifies somebody as a terrorist? Because I mean, Dylan Roof, how is he different from the shooters at like Columbine or something like that?
Well, really, terrorism is just it really depends on how you define terrorism, right? Like when you look at terrorism is trying to make a point by using fear or violence, right? So Dylan Roof is making a point. He had a very racist manifest in the sense that he thought that what he was doing was right. When you look at the Columbine shooters, they, while they killed themselves at the end, they were still trying to make a point through fear and through violence. I look at me personally, I look at all that as terrorism. Do you?
Yeah.
Or do you look at terrorism more as a religious motivated?
Well, no, it doesn't have to be religious. I don't think. Just like like you said, to like invoke fear and to prove a point through violence.
Right, exactly. Because you can make your point by like writing out what you think and posting it online, but who's going to read it? Who's going to pay attention? You go out and murder a few people, that's going to get people's attention. And that to me is how I identify terrorism. David, what do you think? And then Frank.
To say you gonna cut off a hand, cut off a head, that's all Old Testament stuff.
Right.
And when Jesus came, the Old Testament, it was there, but it
And so the Old Testament is the Torah.
yeah.
So that's the book for Judaism. Go on.
And it was abolished.
Right.
Right. So for them saying that, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And then in Afghanistan, they're still living in a Soviet occupation days.
What do you mean, like?
I mean, they live like.
Oh, so they haven't
Soviets
progressed
did.
since then.
Yeah, they
I see what you mean.
haven't progressed at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, and there's a really, really good book I just read about what went on in Afghanistan, and it was called, oh, let me pull it out real fast. No Good Men Among the Living, or something. But it was this guy that spent, I'll have to show it to you guys later. He was a war correspondent in Afghanistan, a Western war correspondent for years. And he really did talk about how, after the Soviet invasion, how they didn't progress, right? Because then the Taliban took right back over. Then the U.S. came in and things looked up for a bit, but then it really just delved back into a tribal war and the tribal politics. And it really was eye-opening, especially if you don't know a lot about the region. It was a good book for someone that doesn't have a lot of knowledge to still be able to follow and understand what he was talking about. Frank, what do you think?
Oh, no, I just was gonna agree with Dave, and you were talking about, the material you wear, or the fact
Right.
that Jesus came and he abolished the Old Testament
Right.
for the New
New Testament, yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
It's nice to look back at the Old Testament and go, look, there's certain things that, obviously the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, I mean, those still kind of apply, but, Dave, help me if I make this wrong, but, there's only two laws now under Jesus Christ, and that is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Right, do any,
That's it. So those are the only two rules now
right.
that we should have to worry about.
And so it really boils down right to the golden rule, right? Regardless of if you're Christian, you're atheist, you're Jewish, you're Muslim, right? You just treat people like you want to be treated, right? That's what gets dicey when you start talking about this refugee crisis, right? Is because it is putting serious strains on many countries. So where do you draw the line of, I want to help my neighbor, right? I want to help these people. But we also have to realize that there's a cost to this, and how is that going to impact society, right? How is it going to impact all of us?
One thing we have to understand is we can't get somebody out of the hole if we climb in their will.
Exactly. No, that's an excellent point. So we're going to shelve that. We're going to come right back to that in a minute, but there's a few things I want to get through before our break. So this just shows you, this is from the Sufan Group and BBC. This is from December 2015. So what you're going to see in ISIS is obviously a lot of Iraqis and a lot of Syrians, but then you also see numbers of fighters from other countries. So a lot of men, men and women. I don't mean just men. There's women involved in this as well. Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Turkey, Turkey, Jordan. Now you see Western countries, France, Germany, and the UK. So you see it's really a mix of people from all over, not just the Middle East, but all over the Western world as well. Okay. And then where was I at? Okay. So I wanted to show you guys, this is a really interesting video from the BBC, and it's actually an interactive video, so it's only about 2 minutes, but it kind of highlights some of the key things I want you guys to know about the rise of ISIS. And it's interactive because it shows like maps and other things.
I don't know anybody else that has as many muhajirin as we do. We have people from all over the world, walillahi alhamd.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Down. Down here. Okay.
From what I understand, they don't have Mosul anymore. Mosul's been taken back.
Going forward, we will be prepared to take targeted and precise military action if and when we determine that the situation on the ground requires it.
Okay, so this is an important point. So in August of 2015 is when the U.S. began airstrikes against ISIS, and that's really what is going to increase the migration crisis. People were still leaving before that, but that's really what we're going to see when we look at graphs of the migrants leaving. That's really what we're gonna see. Okay, so where are they now? So what I want to show you guys is kind of where they're operating now. This gives you an idea of airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. Where the U.S. was focusing. So you can see kind of the northern areas of Iraq and Syria. Okay, and this is interesting too because anything in this dark red is under ISIS control, and these are the oil pipelines and major oil fields. So you can see that their control is relatively close to a lot of these pipelines and to a lot of the oil fields. I did read an article that said they sell oil back to the Syrian government. I've not confirmed that, but that does sound like something that could be plausible. I haven't confirmed it, but it could be there. It could be true. It's just something to consider.
We do that to further weaken it.
Exactly. So Iraq, who controls what? So in Iraq, you see the Iraqi government has control of most of the country. Kurdish forces in the north, and then ISIS here because the Syrian border's over here, so that kind of merges. This is the most up to date one. This was from May 1st, but this one, where'd it go? This one is from Institute for the Study of War, and this was from last week. So you see that black is areas that ISIS is in control of. Red is an area where ISIS conducts offensive maneuvers. And then this gray or this brownish area is an area free of significant action against ISIS and which permits kind of logistics and administration. So they're really in control of the black areas, but really anything in the brown is where they can still pretty much operate without a lot of defense against them. So I mean, it's pretty strong. They still have a pretty big stronghold. However, leading up the last couple months, they have lost quite a bit of land, and really that has to do with Assad's government. So when you look at it from a U.S. perspective, it's good in the sense that ISIS is weakening, but from the U.S. perspective, the U.S. government is opposed to Assad, so he's gaining more and more land back. So is this a win-win or is it a lose-lose? Or a win-lose. It's really, depends on what your perspective is of this. So that's where they're operating now. Now, the West, I want to talk about how the West is responding to ISIS. Do you guys remember really what kind of kicked off the first, when was the first time you guys heard about ISIS? Or do you remember kind of the event that really starts to get the media going more about ISIS? There was a specific journalist. Do you guys remember his name is James Foley? Have you seen his picture before? So in he was killed by ISIS in August of 2014. And they did a beheading video of him and put it online because that's their thing. And that is really when we started to hear more about it in the media, like, okay, they're killing journalists. And the U.S. famously said, we are not going to negotiate, we are not going to ransom him. And they didn't, and they killed him, and they put it on video. And again, U.S. government at that point, what do you do? Like, if you do ransom, they're gonna do it again. So you do have to take a hard. I tend to agree with that policy with the U.S. government. Now, if I was James Foley's wife or mother, I might think differently. But when you look at it, putting aside the emotional part of it, how many more journalists would they then kidnap for ransom? David.
They get a CIA briefing.
Oh, do they? All the journalists?
And they, the CIA make a point to stress to them that if something happens to you, we're not going to do anything.
Yeah, so going in.
In that you're on your own.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like we're like, okay, we'll get ya, but then when you get kidnapped, okay, you're on your own. Like, they know this, and that's something that war reporters all understand about their profession. You guys, there was a really good movie that came out several years ago called Restrepo. Has anyone ever heard of it? Yeah, it's by a really famous war reporter. His name is Sebastian Junger, and Tim Hetherington. And Hetherington was actually killed in Libya about 2 years ago. But it showed they embedded with a unit at Firebase Restrepo, like really deep in Afghanistan. And it really gave kind of a bird's eye perspective of what it was like. Because not a lot of reporters have been embedding for months at a time with these groups. And then there was did you see the sequel, Korangal? That came out after. Those are all on Netflix. It gives you kind of a better perspective. What were you going to say, Ivan?
Oh, I was just going to say that it's crazy how Western journalists are still their balls, to go to these countries where they hate them. Like the Syria one, the dude, the only white dude in the whole country was walking around.
Oh no, in that video?
Yeah,
I know.
And then they even showed that the journalist, the other war journalist that he was interviewing in the beginning of the video, died in the same video.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah, and this war too. Journalists have always gotten killed in war zones. That's just kind of part of it. But this war has been much more brutal when it comes to correspondence. And I as a historian, I really love what they do. But would I do it? There's no effing way I would go to that area. Like right now, the Middle East is off my bucket list for visiting. Like I'd like to, as a historian, be able to go see all these old sites, but I think I'll wait. I'll look at National Geographic for now. Okay, so another way I want to look at how the West is responding is we're going to look at some political cartoons. Specifically kind of how Obama responded to ISIS. So I'm going to put you guys into pairs or small groups. I don't care how you do it, just as long as you're kind of working with someone. So if you're online and you're viewing this as a video, I put an announcement with an attachment of these cartoons. So since you guys are in class, you're going to get it. So you can kind of disregard that announcement. But again, break off into pairs or small groups, and you're going to analyze each cartoon. So what is the main point of each cartoon? So maybe just have one person in the group kind of jot down something you're not turning it in. We'll just talk about it as a group. I'll pass these out. So there's, I think I have 8 cartoons on there for you guys. So just what do you think is the main point of each cartoon? Because that's the point of a political cartoon, right? Is to make specific points. I love political cartoons. Okay, so I'll give you guys about, I don't know, 5-6 minutes. We're at 11:16 right now, so we'll give you 5 minutes or so on this, and then we'll come together as a group and look at them. I'll put them on the slides for you guys on the big screen, and then we'll talk about it, and then I'll give you guys a little break. So again, definitely work together, bounce ideas off of one another. The thing about political cartoons is everything in a political cartoon makes a point, right? Everything in the background, every image, every little word, everything makes a point. I know, as a historian, I love looking at political cartoons. That's like something that in 100 years people can look back at these cartoons and get an idea of how Obama responded to ISIS.
Every conflict or every war we get into, we end up building the country back and supplying them with all kinds of stuff. But every country that we supply with, we end up fighting. Eventually.
Eventually.
We end up fighting.
Yeah, like, because someone can be your ally one day and 10 years later be your enemy. And then they have all the goods that you gave.
It's on the same lines as being a drug dealer. Why are you gonna get a 9-to-5 job when you're making $2,000 a week?
Well, yeah.
Why go get paid minimum wage when I'm making that kind of money?
Right. It's kind of like human trafficking too. Like those people make a ton of money. Why would you be on the up and up when you just traffic people, right? So these are all dealing with responses to ISIS. So work together and just kind of like pick out the key point of each cartoon. We'll talk about it.
There's always a high risk with easy money, though.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what's interesting about human trafficking is a lot of women are traffickers. And like in the sex trafficking industry, like you don't think about that. You think it's like old dudes that are like gross, like trafficking women. But if you saw a woman like my age with like a small girl at an airport, you probably wouldn't think anything of it, right? You would just be like, oh yeah, it's mom and daughter or sisters or niece and aunt, and you don't even think about that. So using women is actually a really ingenious part of human trafficking. Sadly, I don't mean that in a flattering way. I just mean it's what it is.
It's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, is the U.S. on like a higher priority? Like, what's the U.S.'s like main priority? To stop ISIS or to stop Assad?
I think, well, it should be to stop ISIS. But I think for them it's Assad. Like when you look at Trump's reaction so far, like they shelled that air base, which was a Syrian government-held base. So I don't know. But there's also a lot of things that they're doing that we don't know yet. You know, like how they're responding to ISIS. ISIS is weakening though, but it doesn't mean that they can't. Something else will happen that makes them strong again.
Yeah, but they should have took a cue from Iraq.
Yeah.
If you get rid of him, it's going to just cause another
Right.
power back.
So yeah, who is going to replace Assad? And will it be a Sunni? Will it be a Shia? Will it be sectarian? Yeah, I mean, everyone's looking for their own interests. You know, you can't blame Russia for looking after their own interests. You can't blame us for looking after our own interests. But that's kind of the danger of such politically entangled geopolitical world. You know, is like, it's really, when you make a decision, you have to think about all these little things. You can't just think about how is it going to impact you.
That's why I don't go outside.
We can tell you're all pasty. You have a vitamin D deficiency. You don't?
It's burned. I go beyond, like, whiter than I was. Eventually I'll be invisible.
You will? You're just going to become translucent? We'll see all your veins and everything. Okay, so just for the sake of time, let's look at these. So I have them up on the screen in order of how you guys have them. So what is this political cartoon saying about Obama?
He's trying to disarm the ISIS,
Trying to disarm ISIS?
but people were just supplying him with more just horrible ideas.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so how is he supposed to do it, right? What tools is he supposed to use to defeat ISIS? David, what do you think?
I think of it as world saying, okay, come on, do something, and he has to figure something out.
So that's how I interpret it. I interpret this as he's not doing enough, right? That people are saying, hey, you've got all these tools at your disposal. Why aren't you doing more? Because Obama does, regardless of your politics here, if you liked Obama or not, he did struggle in responding to ISIS, right? How do you kill people, or how do you scare people that aren't afraid to die, right? Like, they'll blow themselves up for what they believe in, so what do you do, right? Okay, so what do you guys think of this one?
The West shattered Iraq, and we're trying to put it back together.
And I think that actually says something about George W. Bush.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. But you can look at it the West too. I mean, just as the coalition, right, that went into Iraq. That's the beauty of political cartoons too. It's kind of your interpretation. And then, this paints Obama in a more positive light, right? Like, he's got to go in and fix this. But
Yeah,
Well, I think it's also trying to say that he's not capable of fixing it because it's too broken. You can't fix a shattered
With
mirror
glue.
with glue. It's
Yeah, right.
just not going to work.
But in that way, I think it's showing him as more positive for how he's dealt with Iraq and Syria, because what could he have done,
Yeah.
right? So that's my interpretation. You guys have a totally different one, and that's cool.
because to me, he didn't make the problem. He just inherited it.
He inherited the problem, and he had that problem of timing, right? When he comes into office was right when Bush had negotiated that withdrawal to happen in 2011. Now, I don't know the mechanisms that Obama had available to him as president. I mean, I'm sure he could have said, we're not going to honor that agreement. Maybe he would go back and do things different now that he saw what happened after 2011. We'll have to wait for the tell-all book. Okay, so what do you guys think of this one? Yeah, he's just hanging out, right?
He makes it seem like he's doing something when really he's not.
Exactly. Yeah. So what? Smoking beers, right? Like, oh, I'm busy formulating this policy against ISIS, but nothing really is. But Obama did do a lot against ISIS when it came to drones. Like, when you think about the legacy of Obama's foreign policy, it was this huge increase in the drone war. That started under Bush, but Obama was the one that really took that technology and completely embraced it. Okay, let's see our next one. What do you think of this one?
He's fighting the snake with the stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's using something so minimal for something that's dead.
Right.
He's hung up on ISIS with no game plan.
Yeah, hung up on, that's how I kind of interpret it, like,
Doesn't know the right tool for the job.
exactly, not the right tool for the job.
It's almost like, too, as soon as he fights off the first one,
Yeah, another one comes.
Well, and I think that's a key point that we have to consider about ISIS, right? Like, they said in the video I showed you guys from BBC, the original guy that kind of forms ISIS, after he dies, you would think, oh, you kill a leader, right? If you kill a leader, that's kind of like, in history, if you can kill or capture a leader or capture a capital, you've won the war. This is completely different. And how do you take traditional military strategy and apply it to this type of conflict, right? It's completely changing the game when it comes to military history. Okay, let's see what's next. What do you guys think of this?
Always hear gas and what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. putting gas on the fire, right? And I think when you look at his drone policy, it did radicalize a lot more people because, you know, while they are trying to be as accurate as possible, you know, when it comes to bombings and using drones, there's still going to be human error, right? Like, you're still not going to get the right target. And in that case, you know, people are going to just see that the U.S. dropped a bomb on me or the Russians dropped a bomb on me, and that's all I care about. I don't care about the politics behind it. I'm just going to go with the side that didn't drop the bomb on me.
Yeah, but it's like you said, how can they, when they embedded with the Fox Nation?
Right, exactly. How do you know? It's what the Vietnam veterans faced in Vietnam, is how do you know who is loyal to the South Vietnamese government versus who's Viet Cong? You don't know, right? And unfortunately, that is going to result in shoot first, ask questions later, because if it's you against some other guy and you don't know who it is, it's your life, right? Like, you have to make that split-second decision.
Be judged by 12 and care by 8.
So this one's interesting. I think this makes a good point about Al-Qaeda and ISIS together, right? That Al-Qaeda's starting to weaken, and it's like, oh, okay, things are going really well, and then bam, ISIS emerges, and they're even worse, right? So can you imagine, like, what if we get rid of ISIS and something even worse comes in its place, right? You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah. And this makes a really sad point about how ISIS gets some of their weapons. Obviously, they're not getting them all from us, but, you know, things that we had given in the, because I don't know if you guys, when Iraq was really under ISIS control, when a lot of Iraq was, what they do is they would capture large forces of the Iraqi army or the Iraqi police forces, and they would kill them, and they'd take all their weapons. So, and a lot of those weapons were high-tech weapons from the United States, okay? So let's take a break. We'll just take 5 minutes. It's 11:27. We're gonna come back at 11, we'll say 11:33. Give you 5.5 minutes. Hit the bathroom, check your phones, take a smoke break. Whatever it is you need to do, and then we're gonna start talking about the migrant crisis. See if any good news notifications popped up during class. Nope. Ethan?
Brandon Scott's film I did.
You have friends?
I do have friends.
Oh,
It's crazy, right?
that's adorable.
It is. Do you have friends? Or you just like
No,
just cats?
just cats. I do love my cats so much.
Do you even have cats?
What's that?
Do you even have cats?
I have 2 cats.
Oh,
I would have more, but my husband.
So you're like 40.
Oh, I'd have at least 5 if I could.
Yeah.
My husband said, me or a 3rd cat. I'm still deciding.
It's up there.
I'm just joking. And one of my cats is a giant. He's like over 20 pounds.
Yeah.
And
20 pounds?
he's huge. And he's lost weight too. Like he's on a diet. He's not happy about it. He's the Wilford Brimley of cats.
Yeah.
He's gonna have diabetes.
My friend's dog has diabetes.
Does it really?
Yeah. Every day at 7 p.m. they have to give insulin shot.
Oh, that's sad.
It's crazy.
Is it fat?
No, it's super skinny.
It's just like one of those.
Yeah, and it's like it's an ankle biter. I don't know which breed. Like a terrier or something. Blind. Like the dog has it's lived like way past where it was supposed to.
How old is it?
Like 12 or something.
What are you trying to say, Ethan?
I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just saying the dog has diabetes.
Are you trying to say that your friends should kill their dog?
I'm like at risk for diabetes and I weigh 110 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am. It's like all over my family. Everyone in my family's got it.
Oh, really?
That's why I do triathlons.
Because you're
Keeps me
just-
fit,
You're
yeah.
scared about diabetes.
I am, yeah. Yeah, it's not pleasant.
It doesn't seem pleasant. I like a lot of snacks.
Yeah. You probably don't have too much of a problem. Skinny people can have heart attacks too, though.
Well,
There was a guy in a triathlon recently that died in the water. He had a heart attack during the swim.
really?
Yeah.
Just last week?
No, the one it was like the one the Ironman in Texas about a month ago. It was a 7th Ironman. Like the guy was fit, you know. So just because you're fit doesn't necessarily mean that something's not going on.
Yeah.
You know, you never know.
I was gonna start the quiz last night because after I was here and I was like, well, I'm not going for the email. I'm just gonna go home and get ready for stuff. And I started drinking. By the time I think you emailed me back, I'm just like, there's no way I can even start this.
Well, you know that if you don't get it in, like today, it's still 20% off. So you better get it in. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started again. So for the second half of class, what I want to focus on now is this effects of the rise of ISIS and the Syrian civil war, which is the immense amount of refugees that are coming out of the area. Now, let's take another poll to start off with. So when you are looking at this, this poll, which country has accepted the most refugees from Syria and Iraq? And I really just kind of mean generally speaking through the whole area. I say Syria and Iraq, but there's also some refugees coming out of Afghanistan still, and some from northern Africa as well because of the civil wars in Libya. I know. I don't know why all of a sudden these used to be really big.
It used to be smaller. It used to be not that many numbers either.
I don't know. They changed it on me.
It was 5 or something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's only response settings.
Well, I just got this notification where they said we have new charts, and I was like, well, your new charts suck. But they don't care. It's a free account, so they're not going to listen to me, right?
It seems like every week a new Facebook update comes out, but no one asks for it.
Yeah, we don't ask for this. All right, so you guys did good on this. I actually thought this would throw a lot of you off. Turkey's actually accepted the most refugees. So when you look at the majority, so the estimates are between 9 and 11 million refugees coming out of the Middle East. From Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Northern Africa. The majority obviously coming from Syria and Iraq. Now, the 3 countries that have taken the most of them, the majority is Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. So they've kind of stayed within the region. Another thing you might see is when you look at kind of the terms that they use when they talk about refugees, they'll use migrants, but they also talk about people who are internally displaced. So there's a lot of people in Syria who are considered refugees that haven't left the country. They might have left the city, that they're from and gone to another safer place within the country. But I think there's about, it's really hard to get exact numbers when it comes to refugees, right? It's very hard for the UN and these international organizations to actually find specific numbers. So the numbers I'm giving you today tend to be a little more general, but I believe there's about 4 million are internally displaced within Syria. And then several million more have come through Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon, and then several million more are coming either to the United States or to Western Europe. Okay, so what I want to start off with is I want to know if you guys have seen this photo. What do you think this photo is depicting? This is a super famous photo that just recently, I guess in the last 6 months or so. They're fleeing their homeland. Where do you think they are? They're landing in Greece. Because for the refugees that are using a water route, they're trying to get in through Greece. So when you look at the Western European routes that refugees are taking, they can go overland through like Hungary, right, and like Eastern Europe. They can take a boat through the Aegean Sea from Syria, land in Greece, which is what these people did. They are Syrian. A lot of them, though, are coming from Northern Africa, and they're sailing over the Mediterranean Sea. Is this safe? No. You have thousands of them are dying because it's human smuggling. It's illegal for them to take these routes. So it's not like these governments are setting up ferries to bring them back and forth. It's human smugglers that are charging exorbitant amounts, sometimes thousands of euros for these people to take these trips. They're putting them on like these oversized, overcrowded dinghies. They are sinking in the Mediterranean Sea and the Aegean Sea, and thousands of them are dying. So this leads me, so when you look at a photo like this, there's a few ways you can react to this photo, right? Like when I look at this, I remember the very first time I saw this, I got choked up the first time I saw this come out, because this is just a guy who's trying to protect his family, right? But then it's easy to look at these photos on social media and just keep flipping through. But this is a real person, right? Like this is a guy that could be like any guys in this room. And so your participation nugget today is this man's name. His name's Laith Mahid, and he's an English teacher from Syria. So it's important sometimes when you look at these iconic photos coming out of this refugee crisis is what is that person's name? What do they do? Who are they, right? Like they're not just a faceless person amongst millions, right? Like they're real people. Now, how many of you have ever had to be a refugee or flee your home? Okay, so that's something I want you to keep in mind when we talk about how this impacts Europe, because there are real social issues that we have to consider. And just because you identify social issues and you are a person who wants to curb immigration does not mean that you are against these people, right? But we do have to identify that we've never been in that situation. So when you are considering this issue, keep that sympathy, that empathy with you, because we don't know how these people feel. And what if one day we all had to flee to Mexico for some reason, right? We want Mexico to be like pretty kind to us and take us in, or Canada. They're always nice. They might take us, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind, right? Like these are real people, and we don't know their struggle like they know it.
The closest thing that like came down to trying to flee home in, was it 2008 in Iowa? They had a huge flood that like destroyed Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
And like I remember they still talk about this, like they still talk about it to this day as like this big thing. So if a country's being destroyed, it's gonna be talked about for.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So, people that have had to flee their homes in the middle of the night, maybe from like a wildfire or something like that, I think they're in a good position to maybe understand where these people are coming from. Okay. Now, we do know, so we just identified that the majority of refugees have stayed in the Middle East, but I do want to note that rich Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the UAE, how many refugees have they taken? 0. And that is where I think this is a problem with the U.S. relationship with these Gulf states is when it comes to these wars in the Middle East, where are those countries, right? Why aren't you guys helping? It's your religion. This is your area of the world. Why are U.S. soldiers, why are 4,500 U.S. soldiers dying in Iraq when the Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Dubai and these rich areas aren't sending any soldiers at all? So I think that's something to consider as well. That never gets addressed in the media. It did get addressed in the 2016 campaign from Bernie Sanders. He did bring that up quite a bit, like his plan for the Iraq War was to pull out U.S. ground troops and to force these wealthier countries in the region to pick up the slack. Okay, now let's identify the issues that this is causing in Europe. So when you think about some of the problems that you have the effects on Europe, you have economic, you have social, and you have political issues. So based off, if anything you guys have read in the news, what do you think the biggest issue people are facing in Europe when it comes to the migrants or refugees, or however you want to identify them? So if you're like, Germany's taking a lot of them, Sweden, that map kind of shows you the countries that are taking the most. What do you think these countries are facing now with these immigrants coming in? What's the first thing people always say when it comes to immigrants? They're taking our jobs, right? Okay. Now that's something you have to consider about Europe, though, is they've always relied on migrants for their workforce, especially after World War II. And there was, millions of people that have died, and they encouraged immigration to help their workforce. The problem is, though, when you have 1.3 million immigrants trying to go into the EU, are there enough jobs for all of them at once? Right? And so some of these countries already have high unemployment rates, and then you have this on top of it. So European countries are feeling that burden of how do we assimilate them into our society and make sure that they're becoming productive members of society. What else do you guys think? How do you think this is affecting the politics of the EU and these major European countries? Do you guys know anything about the EU? Kind of the politics. Well, do you know what's going on in Europe right now when it comes to the EU?
They're not sure if they're staying together.
Exactly. Okay, so you guys probably heard of the Brexit vote, right, in 2016. So that kind of kicked it off. So the Great Britain voted to leave the EU, and they have like a 2-year time frame to negotiate with the EU because they have to now renegotiate all their trade deals. They have to renegotiate how people from Great Britain can move throughout Europe, et cetera. So there's like all these little things you have to consider.
And wasn't that it was a close vote where like the older population was yes and the younger population was no?
Yeah, it was a relatively close vote. And then you have countries within Great Britain, like Scotland, voted to stay. And so now Scotland is also discussing, well, we should, because remember, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, Scotland voted to leave Great Britain. And barely did it didn't pass, but by barely. So there's a lot of sentiment in Scotland that we should leave Great Britain. That vote didn't go through, but then when Brexit came through and Scotland as a whole voted to stay with the EU, but since they're part of Great Britain, and Great Britain as a whole voted to leave the EU, they are part of that. So now that's kind of rekindled these talks of, do we stay part of Great Britain or do we leave Great Britain? Because you do have certain benefits in the EU. If you're in an EU country, like let's say you live in Spain, or let's say you live in France and you want to go to Germany, do you have to, you need a passport, you just cross. They use the same currency, right? So there's a lot of benefits, but there's also the people that are kind of anti-EU feel that the EU is too political and they put too many restrictions and rules on its member countries. So Great Britain voted for Brexit. Now what about France? You guys know what happened in France's last election?
Yeah, it got hacked.
Well, it did get hacked, yeah. But the guy so there was 2 main people. There was Emmanuel Macron, who won, who was considered a centrist, but he would be considered like wildly left in the United States. But he was up against a woman named Marine Le Pen, who was very anti-EU and anti-immigrant and a very much kind of like a nationalist type of view, right? And that's one of the issues with Europe right now is there's a resurgence in nationalism, and that's one of the causes of World War I. Nationalism is different than patriotism. But what you start to see is when you start to have this nationalist movement, you marginalize people. And then that leads to unrest. So a nationalist movement going through Europe right now, I've been watching it from over here, and when I saw the French election come up, I actually thought Marine Le Pen had a really good shot of winning. Because she does kind of advocate for this idea of France first, right? We need to curb immigration. France does have like 10% unemployment right now too. So she makes good points. She lost pretty big. I almost said bigly. She lost pretty big. She got 1/3 of the vote. And so in political terms, that's a landslide. That's still 1/3 of people in France. You can't discount that. You can't say, oh, you lost, so your views don't matter. The best way forward for Emmanuel Macron is to really listen to those people and integrate parts of their policies into his policies today. So Europe is facing a lot of issues. But one thing I do want to point out is, again, to reiterate, when you look at the media, it looks like all the immigrants are coming into Europe, but they're really staying within the Middle East. But some of them don't even have that option, and those are the people that are coming into the EU countries, David.
Well, for all those immigrants in Europe, that's why they have drive to terrorism.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's something to consider as well, because, again, while people always say that we just let immigrants in the U.S., you have a 6-layer vetting process. It takes almost 2 years to get to the United States. We're not just letting people in willy-nilly. But the problem with open borders in EU is exactly that, right? And so when you think about like those Paris attacks and the attacks in Belgium, and obviously you can't say all these immigrants are terrorists because they're not, but it's easy for someone to kind of slip in, right, and create this unrest. So that's a valid concern that European countries have to understand, and they can't be boxed out. That argument can't be shut down by the liberals when they say, well, we have to let everyone in, but you also do have to consider everyone's views on this. We're all living in this society and how it's impacting everyone collectively. So I'm going to show you guys 2 points of view. So I do want to humanize the face of migrants, but I also want to show you guys an ABC news clip. This is about 7 minutes, and just kind of talks about the anti-immigrant protests that grow as refugees flood into Europe, just to kind of give you the point of view of these people that are saying, hey, this is a problem for us. Because they have a legitimate beef as well.
Here at home, it pales in comparison to the dark backlash spreading across Europe. Tense protests, street brawls, even arson attacks. So what does this mean for the thousands of refugees now caught up in a personal purgatory? Here's my Nightline co-anchor, Dan Harris.
We want a Europe free from fear, free from terrorists who shout Allah Akbar.
There is something unsettling about standing in a square once named after Adolf Hitler and listening to thousands of Germans chant nationalist slogans.
What they're chanting now is traitors of the people. They're referring to the leaders of Germany who are allowing all these refugees in.
Germany has just registered its 1 millionth refugee, and these people want to send them home. This continent is at a boiling point. While the debate over Muslim refugees rages in America, we're traveling across Europe, where the far right is turning angry rhetoric.
The reality is that the next terrorist attack in Europe will be by Muslims.
Into reality.
We want Sweden to stay Swedish.
Fueled by a seemingly endless river of refugees, as well as by the ISIS attacks in Paris.
At least one attacker posing as a refugee.
Ultra-conservative, anti-immigrant parties are on the rise. Caught in the crosshairs, the migrants, many of them escaping war zones, only to now be confronted with a wave of assaults and arson attacks. In Germany, the most provocative anti-refugee movement is called Pegida. And it's led by this man, Lutz Bachmann. Recently, this picture of him, apparently masquerading as Hitler, surfaced in the local media. He insists it was photoshopped.
We are for the Christian, Jewish culture, because this is the culture we have in Europe. We don't have an Islam culture here.
But so there's no room for another religion?
Islam is no religion. It's an ideology, a fascistic ideology.
A fascistic ideology.
Yeah.
This is a chant with ominous historical overtones. They're chanting liar press, presumably aimed at us. This is a chant that the Nazis used to use.
But to my surprise, the people here aren't stereotypical skinheads. They seem like regular, reasonable folks who are simply scared.
When some people are living with the Islam, it's okay, but not so much.
Just a couple hundred yards away from the Pegida rally, there is a much smaller rally of anti-Pegida protesters. Your critics say that your rhetoric is inspiring violence against the refugees.
Okay. If they say it, okay, but it isn't.
going to be hard to contain. The police are moving the counter protesters away, but the Pegida folks are occupying the high ground up here.
Minor skirmishes like this are just a foretaste of what Bachmann says lies ahead.
The outcome is going to be a civil war in Europe.
Civil war.
Civil war in Europe. This is going to be the outcome.
The next morning, we head 2 hours north to meet a young man who finds himself in the middle of this potential war. A young man we happen to know quite well.
I'm from Syria, from Aleppo.
We first met 21-year-old Ali.
Hello.
Back in September in Turkey.
No, the journey starts.
We followed him and his friends as they made the 2,000-mile journey, attempting perilous border crossings.
I think we're starting to get close.
In the dead of night.
We're right on the border.
All the while with their eyes on the prize.
Germany, we're going to stop at Germany.
Germany.
What kind of life do you think you'll have there?
A good life. Like easy, simple life.
But 3 months later, the easy, simple life he imagined in Germany is
really
decidedly more complex.
This is pretty far removed from anything. Welcome, man.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to
How
see
are
you.
you?
It's been a long
Good?
time.
Yeah, I know.
He's clearly relieved to see familiar faces here in this remote corner of East Germany, where he's been placed by the government without anybody he knows.
When you walk through the village, do people say hello to you, or?
No.
No?
No. They look at you strange like this, and they will go. And now I'm going to show you my room.
He tells us he spends most of his time at this hotel for refugees.
This one is our teacher. She's perfect.
Where he's trying to learn German while he waits for a temporary residency card. He says he's keenly aware that many people are suspicious of him.
They think we are terrorists. That's why they are scared from us. They must understand us because the people, they are coming from Syria. Yeah, running from war, running from everything.
So they're not coming here to make trouble, they're coming here to
Of course,
survive.
they want peace. They don't want any problems. They don't want to hear any shotguns. They don't want to hear any bombs coming on their houses.
Thank you. Good luck. Good luck.
Take care of yourself.
I almost feel badly leaving him, but we have to head north to Sweden, where in a country that famously promised asylum to any Syrian refugee who could get there, a surprising backlash is brewing. A party called the Sweden Democrats, led by youthful, energetic nationalists, is surging in popularity. We're now arriving in Sweden, famously one of the most welcoming and open countries in all of Europe. But even here, the sheer number of refugees arriving on the shores is testing the limits of a so-called humanitarian superpower. Recently, the deputy prime minister choked up when she found herself forced to announce that the country must renege on its open door promise. We saw right away, police are now forcing refugees to register at the border.
So on this train, they found some people who didn't have the right papers, clearly refugees, and they're being taken away.
But for the young leaders of the Sweden Democrats, this is not enough. They want to stop these people from coming in the first place. The party recently released this ad aimed at anyone contemplating making the journey. This is a party said to have roots in the neo-Nazi movement that has now turned from shaved heads and tattoos to suits and ties.
Sverige håller på att förändras till oigenkännlighet.
Producing videos full of images of an ideal Sweden. This woman is actually a spokesperson for the party's youth group, Linnea Cortez.
The biggest mistakes in Sweden's migrant policy have been that we have received too many on such short time, and this has resulted in a segregated country.
Okay, so I think she brings up a good point there, that the impact of taking so many at once. Right? Do you have the infrastructure? How do you assimilate them? How do you place them? So while it's easy for people to look at these people, and even some of the rhetoric they use in this, like, oh, they're like the Nazis, I don't think that's fair to say anymore. I think you have to realize that these people have legitimate concerns for their country, and that in order for us to really come up with a solution, both sides have to work together. Anti-immigration and pro-immigration. Like, where's the middle ground? Obviously, you're not going to please everybody, but by marginalizing another person's argument because you don't agree with it doesn't get us anywhere. Frank, what do you think?
Well, you know, when that guy was interviewing the Syrian refugee there,
Mhm.
you know.
One of your colleagues in the
sorry.
party, a member of party.
Go on.
You know, how he's saying, you know, no, we're not coming in with guns and bombs and stuff. He's not.
Right.
And probably some of the people he knows are not.
Right.
But there are some.
There are
who
some.
are sneaking through those
Yeah.
groups, which is why we're having issues in France and other European
Right.
countries.
But it is important to note, too, that that's such a small percentage, but that's what is getting noticed.
But those are the scary ones.
Exactly.
And they are a small percentage.
Exactly.
But they're the ones that, you know, drive trucks down the sidewalk and kill 100 people.
Yeah, and definitely a valid point for sure. So how do you keep those people out but letting people in? And that's the problem, right? How do you vet them? David, what do you think?
I don't want to say sound bad or nothing. But,
That's okay.
But I think that no country should allow any immigrants, because if they're at home, they can affect change in their own community.
Well, here's
when all
right.
leaving,
right.
You're leaving your country for the bad people.
Right, and I think that's a really good point too. The problem with that Syrians particularly are facing is you're stuck between Assad, who is a dictator, and then ISIS. So where do you go, right? So another way to look at that, because that is a good point. Another way to look at it too is, what if you do allow these people in, and you welcome them, and you show them the West is not bad, we're not evil, we'll help you. Because if we turn their backs on them, where do they go? Are they forced to hook up with Assad's regime? Are they forced to join the Free Syrian Army? Are they forced to join ISIS? So again, there's no easy answer to this at all. And I think every side has really valid points that we have to consider. I mean, it's really hard to say we can't take any immigrants, but we also can't take them all, you know? So an open door policy is nice, but at some point the door has to close, right? So when you say that. So I want to show you just a point of view from this kid, Mohammed. And just to give you more of a kind of personal face of what some of these people are facing, I always feel poignantly bad for the kids that are caught up in this. Like, you know, kids like his age, like that's all they've known their whole life, right? Is this unrest that's been going on. So this gives you just kind of the flip side of it.
أنا بشتاق للمدرسة لأنه حلوة، وأنا بشتاق لرفقاتي لأنه كنا نلعب على طول مع بعض، وأنا بشتاق لأخواتي كتير. خيي ما فيني بلا، خيي بحبه كتير، بيحبني كتير، وأختي كمان.
He's in Lebanon, by the way.
أول شي ما كنت أعرف وين المطعم ولا هاي، بيي كان يشتغل هناك. أما شفت الشغل وصرت بدي أشتغل مع بيي. حسيت إنه لازم ساعد أهلي وهاي. اليوم بياخد 10,000 ما بتكفينا، مصروف ما بتكفي، وجاء البيت 200,000 ما كان يمشي.
وبعدين يلا يا بي يلا يا بي، الشغل مش عيب يلا.
أنا بحب أشتغل مع بيي لأنه بيعلمني أشياء ما بعرفها.
هيك بكره بتصير أحلى شيف شاورما. وين بتكوني سانجور؟ بلبنان يا خيي ببيروت.
أحيانا كنا نمزح مع الشغيلة، المعلم بيحبني كتير مثل ابني. مرة مزح معه صار يرش عليه كاتشاب، صار يرش عليه خردل كمان. ابن اختي قال شو رايك تعملي لي همبرجر؟ ابن اختي حط على راسه بطاطا. كنا نفرح، كان نشوف العالم نفرط من الضحك. أحيانا بيجيني طاقات إنه بدي بطل وهاي، بعدين الحين بس يصير مثلا بحب الشغل. بس أحيانا كنت ضايق لأنه الأولاد عم يلعبوا وأنا أشتغل. كل ما بدي حدا يروح وأنا أشتغل بدي أفتح. أنا اسمي محمد عدنان طاووس. أنا أصلي من حلب، عشنا شي 20 سنة بالشام بعدين نجينا لهون. وبعدين اخواتي عم يدرسوا بالمركز.
7220.
رحت يوم من هون كنت معطل، فرحت لما شفت اولاد وهاي عم يلعبوا هاي، صار رأيي يروح على المدرسة.
قوم يا محمد.
لما كنت اجي على المركز كنت انبسط.
66.
أنا بحب المدرسة لأنه بيعلمونا أشياء ما كنا نعرفها، صرنا نتعلمهم. أنا الأحرف الأبجدية ما كنت أعرفهم، علموني إياها. الأحرف الإنجليزية ما كنت أعرفهم، علموني إياها. مع إنه السات ما بيضربونا هيك، خلوني علينا. ما كان عندي رفقات، بس لما رحت على المركز صاروا يعلموني وشوف رفقاتي هناك. كنا نلعب مع بعض مع اخواتي كمان. كنت اخواتي كتير، بنلعب سوا، بنلعب على البسكليت، بنلعب بالكمبيوتر، يعني ما في شيء بضايقنا. واحد إذا ما بده يلعب ما بيلعب الكل. أحيانا بنلعب كتير، نلعب أحيانا نتدرب أنا ويا أخي. أخواتي أصدقاء، وقت الحرب كنت خاف عليهم وما خاف على حالي. كانوا يصير شيء بخاف عليهم. خيي أصغر مني بس سمع صوت شيء واس دغري بيرقد، لا بيطلع قدامه ولا هاي. بيرقد بقول له استنى، إذا رقدت تيجي فيك رصاصة يعني من الشام. شيل من ورا. لما صاروا يقوصوا علينا بالمدرسة نروح نجيبهم من الصفوف أو نرقد. صار الأحداث وهاي، والأنسات ما كانوا يدرسونا، كانوا يخافوا علينا. سكروها المدرسة، ما عاد يخلونا نجي عليها وفجروها.
لا غلطان، الجنط ما في شيء، بس الدولاب الخارجي من هون نشفان.
ثاني يوم بدنا نروح على بيت أختي، برعنا من حد المدرسة وشفناها مخربة ومكسرة محروقة. كنت حبكي شيء تاني. شفت جثث، شفت كانوا يزتون ورا البيت، ما حدا بيسكن فيه، بيزتوه وراه.
Oh, come on.
شفنا واحد جاتينه اجت هون رصاصة، في واحد كابينه مخه طالع.
Come on, internet. I wonder if I...
أنا ممنوع يعرب عليهم. كنت أحلم هو يقوم ينط عليه. وبعدين تعودت، ما كنت بطلت خاف. في كتير تركوا سوريا، في منهم قتلوا بسوريا، ماتوا بسوريا، صعب كتير. كان أول يوم العيد، كنا أنا وياه سوا. رحت أنا أجيب فلافل أمي نزلت فيه. جزار طرفي. وصل الضغط لعندي. اللي أنا قاعد هون بدي قاعد هون عم جيب الخرز، عم نلم الخرز. قلت له ماشي، أنا رايح أجيب فلافل، أنت استناني هون. بس انطلق عندي. قلت يا ريت لو كنت رايح معه أحسن. في حدا بيحب الحر؟ ليش عم تعملوا هيك؟ ما حرام؟ انتوا عم تقتلوا اخواتكم.
Okay, well, on that depressing note, kind of gives you more of a human face of, you know, how this impacts people as individuals, right? And so again, you can have empathy for this child and the people there and still realize that there are realistic expectations that we have to place on how many immigrants these countries can accept, or maybe the timetable of how they accept them, right? So I don't know the answers to that, but it's just something as world citizens that you guys should maybe just, you know, keep an eye on and be aware of, you know, for future news stories. Now I wanted to also show you guys this. This is from last year, but I like the visuals in it. It's Migration to Europe explained in 7 charts. So it kind of gives you some nice visuals here, but so, you know, which countries are the migrants from? So you see Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, which is, you know, we all expected that, right? But you also see in the Balkan region as well, there's still some unrest in Kosovo, Albania, and then also Nigeria.
The Nigerian prince got out?
He did. He didn't give you your money, though, did he? Where are the migrants going? So we also, this is what I had up on the screen earlier, but you can see the major countries that they're being resettled in, specifically Germany, Sweden, France. One of the issues in France is there's an area over here called Calais where you can cross the English Channel. It's like the spot where it's like the shortest way to cross the English Channel into Great Britain. And there was a migrant camp there for a long time. I don't know if it's still there, where at night they'd all try to cross illegally, try to smuggle themselves through the channel, usually on boats, and then make it over to England that way. So that was a major issue. How do migrants get to Europe? So this is interesting. So migrants detected entering the EU illegally from 2014 to 2015. So you can see where they're coming from. So the Middle Eastern immigrants, they can cross over land, and they're impacting Hungary. Hungary actually closed their border with Croatia and built a fence because of the large amounts of immigrants coming in. You can see this is the Aegean Sea where a lot of people from Syria will be coming over from, and they make it to Turkey and then they cross from Turkey over to Greece. Here's your Northern Africa immigrants. They're coming into Spain there. This is from Libya, and they're crossing. This is the most dangerous. These ones are the ones that are dying at the highest rates because their boats are sinking into the Mediterranean Sea. But you know what's interesting is your book makes this point. Where do you guys think, where do most illegal immigrants enter illegally? Is it water? Are they walking? Like, what do you guys think? It's actually airports. Yeah, and that actually surprised me too. Most illegal immigration, they come in on visas legally, and then they don't leave, and they overstay their visas. So that's an interesting kind of twist that you don't really think of, right? Like, they'll come in legally, or they'll have false passports. I was going to recommend this video to you guys. It's called Frontline. Hold on a second. This document, I was gonna assign it to you guys this week, but it's 2 hours. This actually gives, if you ever have an opportunity on your own to watch it, they follow 5 people and families from different countries as they cross either the Mediterranean or as they come into these countries. But one of the guys in here uses a false passport. So that's another thing as well that people are coming in on.
Wait, did you say like the highest illegal immigration is through airport?
Mm-hmm. Well, but then they stay illegally after their visas expire. So when you look, and that actually applies a lot to Western countries, right? Like, you'll come in on, what, a 3-month visa, a 6-month visa, but if they don't know where you went within the country, how can they track you to send you back? So that's one of the issues that when we look at immigration, we tend to think of, like, in the United States, we tend to think of people crossing the Sonoran Desert, right, coming into Arizona, crossing the border that way on foot, but a lot of them will come in legally and they just overstay their visas. And then at that point, you're an illegal immigrant, right, because you're overstayed your visa. How dangerous is the journey? So more than 3,700 migrants were reported to have died trying to cross the Mediterranean just in 2015. So again, most died on that crossing from North Africa to Italy, but more than 800, this would have been Syrians and Iraqis, died in the Aegean crossing from Turkey to Greece. The summer months are the most deadliest because it's the busiest time for migrants to cross. But you can see that April in 2015 was a major month for a lot of them to die. Which European countries are most affected? So this is asylum applications per 100,000 people in a local population. So you see Hungary, Sweden, Austria, Norway, Finland, Germany. And these numbers are different now because this is a year old, but it gives you kind of the general countries that are having issues with this. How has Europe responded? So tensions have been rising, again, because of this disproportionate burden faced by some countries, specifically Greece, Italy, and Hungary. Greece is really having a major problem because they're already having their own economic problems, but then they're the stopping point, right, for these people. They're like, Greece can't just like turn people away that are coming off dinghies, but how do they process them then? Like, what do you do with those people? Hungarian government has rejected a plan of 54,000 that were supposed to be moved to them as well. So here's the migrant quotas from EU member states. Germany, France, Spain, Poland, they've all agreed to take the most. Sweden at first, like they mentioned in that video, initially Sweden was the first country that says we will welcome any migrants. But like they said in that video, they eventually were like, oh, well, crap, we have to go back on that. We don't want to, but we have to. But it's important from a historical perspective not to paint people that are stressing, limiting migrants as evil, because that's one of the narratives, right? Is like, oh, well, they just hate Muslims, and that's not true. It's like there are realistic problems that as a society, as a world society, we have to address. And I see that in the media, in liberal outlets, like kind of demonizing these people. They even did that in that video a bit, like these aren't necessarily, I mean, I'm sure there's some assholes in it, like there are in any group of people, but for the most part, those people, their point of view is for their own personal country, and that's a valid argument. Frank, what do you think?
Oh, it's just that, I mean, we joke that Islam is a religion of peace, and honestly, it truly is if it's done the way it's in the Quran.
Right.
It's the fanatics who are perverting it, and turning it into this whole,
It's the quintessential one bad apple spoils the bunch, right?
And unfortunately, they got a few bad apples.
Right. But that's my point, where these other Muslim countries that aren't being involved, like you guys are Muslim countries, why aren't you stepping up and saying this is not what Islam is about and fighting back against these? Why are you putting it on, they're just allowing Western countries because we're willing? Those countries, I think, should also face more of the burden, especially these wealthy Gulf countries. Okay, so let me see if I have anything else for you. That was my last slide. So again, just as we progress through the class, if you see any information you want to share with the class that you think is interesting or relevant to this topic, feel free to share it. David, what do you think?
If you think of the rich, as long as it's not bothering them, they don't care. Just like in our country. The rich look down at people joining the military. They think their kids are above it.
Right.
So, same thing about the Arab Emirates and stuff like that. They're like, I got this lifestyle. I'm not going to have anybody else come in here and burden their lifestyle.
Yeah, we don't want to change our lifestyle for the good of the region.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. That's a really good point. So again, and I don't know the answers. Oh, hi, Virgil. I see you just popped in. I don't have the answers to this. None of us do. Anyone that says that they do is selling you something, But it is something that just, it is a major issue right now, especially in regards to Europe. So keep an eye on what's going to go on in France with this new government. See what they try to do when it comes to the EU, because Macron does want to stay in the EU. That's his stance, where Marine Le Pen did not want to stay in the EU. So I think the EU breathed a sigh of relief with this election. But it'll be interesting to see what goes forward with Britain when it comes to their exit from the EU, and if any other European countries push for an exit from the EU as well.
And if Britain does that, so that's a big chunk.
That was huge. That's major, and it'll be it's going to impact everything about their society, negative or positive. I don't know yet. Okay, so what we're going to talk about on Thursday. Wednesday is we're going to do a kind of a brief history of Cold War tensions between the U.S. and Russia, or the Soviets at that point. And then we'll look at the issues today. So we'll look at the invasion of Crimea under Putin, and we'll look at kind of the major issues facing Russia and the Western countries today. So any questions? That's good. So hopefully we shouldn't have any more technical issues. I think this recorded fine. If you need to go back and look at it, it should be under concluded conferences, but you guys were here. You all got the participation nugget, so you're good to go. Let me know if you have any questions on any assignments, and other than that, you guys are free to go. Have a great day. I'll see you guys on Wednesday.